Hi everyone, welcome to another painting tutorial by Promethean Paints. Today we're going to be painting Space Wolf Terminator. This is quite apt, it's coming when the new Space Wolves have just been released. So we're going to base coated the model using AK Oxford Blue. I did that over a white primer just so it makes the blue pop a little bit more. And then we're going to pretend that blue that's our darkest shade that we've got under the Space Wolf Grey. As we know, Space Wolf Grey isn't really grey, it's a sort of a greyish blue. Their Heresy colours was pretty much grey, but in 40k they have a sort of greyish blue colour, and we're going to try and achieve that today. So first off, what we're going to do is over that blue, using the airbrush, apply some Vallejo White Ink and do what we usually do here, just to create some gradients. So brightest point is where it's going to be most grey, and the darkest areas is where it's going to remain that dark blue colour. Don't worry about that dark blue. Once we put over some of the contrast paints, it'll almost look like a very dark grey with a bluish hint to it. One thing to add with this tutorial is it's a little bit trial and error. I'd heard some really mixed results with the contrast paint, the Space Wolves Grey. A lot of people were saying don't use it, some people were saying use it, not very good through the airbrush. I wanted to try it for myself, just to show what you can do if it doesn't go quite the way you were thinking. So yeah, we're applying the white here, and then we're going to apply some of the GW contrast Space Wolves Grey over the top, and as you'll see, it's mixed results. It doesn't really give good coverage, but it does give the model a blue-grey appearance. There's probably other ways you can achieve this using some other colours, some lighter blue-greys through the airbrush, but I sort of achieved what I wanted to get out of that contrast paint. And then we used another colour over the top of that just to emphasise the blue greyness of it. But just for now, just work yourself around the model using the airbrush's natural ability to create gradients, using the white ink going through it, and where you want the areas to be the brighter sort of Space Wolf Grey is have the most white there, and where you want darker, just leave the dark blue. Okay, now that's done, grab your Space Wolves Grey contrast paint, apply it to your airbrush, and then just go over everything now with that Space Wolves Grey, and you'll see that it will naturally change the hue of that white down into a grey colour, a blue-grey. I did have to apply a few coats of this. It is very odd consistency. It's probably one of their worst contrasts, I'm going to say, but it does the job. I think if you're applying this via a brush, you'd get a different effect. But yeah, just apply this over. You will find you're going to still get the bright areas to a bright grey, blue-grey. So it does work. It just will take a little bit of practice. Don't be disheartened if it doesn't look right. We'll be making it. It does work, as you'll see from the finished model. It does give a really good effect, but at first, yeah, don't be disappointed with the outcome. Grey is a really odd colour, especially a grey-blue to try and paint. But yeah, just work yourself around the model, applying this colour now via the airbrush across all of it. Right, once that's done, grab some of your AK Blue Grey, water this down in your airbrush, a couple of drops of thinner to a drop of the paint, and then just apply this very gently over the areas that you want to be the most brightest, so where the light's catching the edges. So I've done this on the top corners, around the head area, just areas that are pointing up towards the light that you'd find would be the most grey. This just reintroduces some of your highlights, not too much, a few highlights, keep the darks dark, just a few bright points. This helps really sell the grey blue colour, and especially helps cold down the miniature a little bit to give it that sort of winterish feel. Okay, once that's done, I've then just removed his shield, just to make it a bit easier to paint, and gone over all the areas that aren't armour with matte black. I've used the Warpainters matte black, but you can use abandoned black or any colour like that. What I'm going to quickly do here is I'm just going to layer up some yellow paint on his shoulder blade. I'm using AK Volcanic Yellow, but you could use Avalanche Sunset. Again, yellow is a notoriously hard colour to paint. I made a bit of a mistake building this model. I actually glued his arm in place. If you've got an airbrush, what I would suggest you doing in this, and the shoulder pads are separate, is keep them separate. And the method we just did for his body, so base coat the armour in the shoulder pad in black, and then do some airbrush gradients with yellow, and then use the Imperial Fist contrast paint through the airbrush. That would be so much quicker and easier, but for this I just want to show that yes, we all go through troubles painting yellow directly. There's lots of ways you can do yellow. You can just start straight off from yellow, or you can build up to it, but they are still a notoriously tough colour to paint with a brush. You could also base coat this area in white and then go over it in white. Takes a few coats. So yeah, I'll just focus on this. All I'm going to be doing here is painting this yellow and putting a transfer over the top, and then applying a little bit of Seraphim sepia to shade it down with. So nothing too clever on this. I don't focus too much time on highlighting it or anything like that, just a yellow shoulder pad. And then yeah, once I've done a few coats with that, I'll then move over to some deep yellow. I didn't kind of like the volcanic yellow finish, just wanted deep yellow, just a brighter yellow over the top. So yeah, just build the yellow up as best you can on this. But if you've got the airbrush, then I'd certainly suggest Imperial Fist yellow over the gradiented white ink. Okay, we're just going to move on to some leather work, and for that we're going to start off with AK Grim Brown. So yeah, and then we'll first highlight with AK Leather Brown, second highlight with Saddle Brown, and then we'll use some Cadian Fleshtone for some scratches on the leather. So all of the leather work, just base coat it in the Grim Brown. Gives a nice, all this paint really is so that we don't have to apply any shade to the leather. You could just apply the leather brown and then do a Agrax Earth shade wash over it, but I steer clear of washes sometimes, just using paint straight out the pot. So yeah, Grim Brown across all of the leather areas, which on this model there's not too much of. His area around in between his legs and the handle on the his axe. I'd actually painted this before but I forgot to record it, so yeah, the handle on the axe is already done. So what I'm doing here is painting the Grim Brown. Now I'm going over it with leather brown, covering about 90% of the area, just leaving the Grim Brown in the deepest recesses. Then with the Saddle Brown, it's an edge highlight and areas that would catch the light the most, some scratches and some marks. And then the Cadian Fleshtone is again a thin edge highlight and only used to catch the edges and the light areas, just to give some just to make the look and feel of the leather a bit more worn, a bit more weathered. This is our standard leather that we do all the time. I find it really works. So with the leather work done, we're going to be moving over to gold. So we're going to be base coating all the gold with AK Burnt Tin. So this is the sort of, there's some areas at the bottom of the axe. I'm just grabbing the model now. There's areas on the axe. There's some skulls on the bottom of his little leather straps. There's a skull on the leg and the Aquila. We also paint gold. Also going to be painting the shield gold a bit later on. But yeah, just pick out any of your gold in AK Burnt Tin. You could use Balthazar gold, I believe it's called, from Games Workshop. Use that to base coat all of your gold. And then we're going to apply our first highlight using AK Rusty Gold, and like any highlighting, just apply this over the areas that you want to catch the sun directly, so that the top right areas, all the center points. Leave some of that burnt tin as your deepest color, and this is your sort of, so you're covering about 70% of the area you've just done in burnt tin with your rusty gold. In Games Workshop colours, I think this would probably be your Retributor Gold, or if they've got one slightly darker than that, I don't think they have. So you probably have to go straight to Retributor Gold. So you'd be going from very dark to very bright, and that's okay. But yeah, we're just adding a mid-tone here. So burnt tin is your base, rusty gold is your mid-tone, and then the next colour we'll be using is old gold, which is your brightest point. And here we're just applying a tiny bit of old gold now, just to the brightest points, so top parts of the skull, the bits that you really want to be brightest and catch the light. Just apply your old gold there. You can do little edge highlights if you want to, but there's not too many edges on the gold on this model. But yeah, you can do your edge highlighter with your old gold as well. Optional step next would be to use a bright silver, so your Stormholt silver or stainless steel from AK, just to apply a couple of little dots or lines where you want it to be really bright. But I didn't want to do that on this model. I wanted to keep the metallics slightly muted, give it that sort of cold, worn feel. I feel fits the Space Wolves. With that done, we're going to move on to the silvers. There's not actually much on these. It's the sort of pipes leading under his arms. There could be some parts on weapons that you wanted to paint silver. There's a bit around his face, the sort of communication bit on his head that's silver. You'll notice I'm not painting the top part of the axe. we're going to be doing the flame effect on that, so I sort of leave the axe completely unpainted because we're just going to be airbrushing over it later, so there's not really any point in painting that part of the model. So yeah, not too much metal work here. I don't actually highlight this silver with anything. It's muted enough that it doesn't really need a highlight. Okay, for his face, I wanted a brighter than normal face, slightly lighter, paler. So I actually start with a base coat of Kislev Flesh. Takes a couple of coats over the black. So yeah, just a couple of coats of paint over the whole of his face. I then apply a wash of AK Wine Red. So one drop of wine red to many, many, many drops of water, almost of 8, 9, 10 to 1 mix in favour of water. It's a very bright colour. You could use Reichland Flesh Shade if you wanted to. I just find the wine red adds a bit more depth and life to the face. Or you could use Screamer Pink mixed heavily down, or Vulpus Purple, I think it is, or Doom Fire Magenta. Contrast heavily watered down again as your wash. So you can use contrast as wash, you just need to heavily water them down. Any paint can be used as a wash or glaze. Just heavily water them down. So yeah, a couple of coats of Kislev Flesh, wait for it to dry, and then potentially a couple of coats of the red wash. I'll be using wine red or Reichland Flesh Shade just to get the definition to the areas of his face. And then once that's dry, we're then going to apply our first highlight with going to use a little bit of Kislev Flesh just to bring back the shapes, and then use Pallid Flesh to highlight any raised area around his face, like the eyebrows, the nose, the area around the mouth. So very basic skin. Really nothing too complicated, just a bit hard because it's small. But yeah, base coat with Kislev Flesh, give it a wash, and then highlight with Pallid Flesh. You could then use a little bit of an ivory colour to a bit like AK Ivory. It's a couple of dots on his nose just to make that a bit brighter, but it's not necessarily needed at this scale. Okay, we've moved now on to the sort of the Terminatus on his shoulder pad and on his leg, and for this we're base coating in AK Graphite, which is a sort of mid-tone grey, Mechanicum grey I think it's called in Games Workshop colours, probably be okay for this, but any mid-tone grey. As you can see, I'm almost dry brushing this over, so you naturally leave some of the black in there. If you paint it in full, you could just give it a wash of Nuln Oil if you wanted to, just to get some of that definition back. But if you're careful with your brushwork, you can do a sort of dry brushing of it, just to fill in all the raised areas. I then do a highlight of blue-grey colour, so AK blue-grey, the same colour we use through the airbrush. I just use that as my highlight colour, just highlight the top part of the skull, top parts of the bones, just to bring some definition to the Terminatus. Okay, we've made some great progress now. We're on to edge highlighting the armour and the battle damage, and for this we're using that blue-grey colour, AK blue-grey, and we're going to be edge highlighting our Space Wolf and also adding battle damage. And for this you can use it to make some little scratch marks, some little bullet holes, some thicker edge highlighting where you want the damage to be more pronounced across the edges. I do this to add a lot of character to the model, and in this Learn to Paint range they've all got quite a bit of battle damage. Just find it just makes them stand out a little bit, especially Terminators, as I imagine them walking along the battlefield just absolutely getting battered. So yeah, I apply quite a bit of battle damage, and as you can see from this, all you do is just create your bullet holes and create your scratches and create your marks, because in the next stage we're going to be filling in all those little gaps and edges that we create with black, so that they look deeper, that you've gone down to the sort of the core metal of the armour. On larger models you can add a bit more definition, a bit more colour variations to those battle damage, but on models this size, yeah, you just need to do your edge highlighting and then fill the gaps in with black. But you'll see the full process here across the whole model, of adding all the lines and shapes. As you can see, I'm using this is a size 0 brush from it's Raphael. You can get 00, so your artificer type size brush. But you can see here I've just got a good point on the brush, not too much brush loaded on, a little bit of water to thin it down. Don't want it to run too much, but again you don't want it to be too thick. You don't want to lose control of it. Okay, with that done, we're now going to move to the black. So I've just used my Warpainters, the Warpainters Fanatic Black. You can just use a Baden Black for this. And now we're just going to go in and fill in those gaps what we created for the bullet holes and scratches and edges and stuff with the black. I've done the whole model in one go and then filling in all the areas, but if it's your first time or you forget bits, just do a leg and then do the damage on the leg and then fill the damage in, and then next leg and then the arm and then another arm and the back and the front. You can do it like that, break it down into sections, especially if you're doing a large model like a tank or something. Do it section by section so you don't lose any bits or not do enough or too much. But yeah, just go around now, just filling in all those areas that you've just done with black. As you can see along the edges of the legs, I'm almost dotting the paint on, using the thicker side of the brush just to give it a bit of life, to make it a little bit haphazard. You don't want the damage to look uniform. You want it to look, as damage is, just chaos. Yeah, a bit of practice is needed, but you can get some really good results very quickly. Right, and there he is. We're now going to start adding some effects to the model. So the first one will be a red glowing effect. So on the wet palette we've got AK Wine Red, AK Blood Red, some AK White, and then in a minute we're going to add some Green Stuff World Fluorescent Red. So what we're doing here, we're just going to be adding some red glowing effects. So add the paint to any lenses and the back of the armour there on the exhaust. The wine red is the darker red. It's the afterglow, you could think of it. The idea here is we're going from dark to light, the lightest being the hottest, the darkest being the coldest. So wine red is the coldest, all the way up to a fluorescent orange, which is your brightest. So for the vents here, it's going to be the very central points that are the brightest, and on the lenses it will be the lens itself which will be the brightest. So just base coat everything that you want to have glowing with the AK wine red. And once that's done, dries pretty quick, is grab a couple of dots of the blood red. You could use Evil Sun Scarlet here. So for the lenses, I've painted the whole of the lens wine red. With the blood red, you just paint the actual lens itself with the red. And on the vents here, I'm just going to be painting that central section. So imagine if it was in thirds, those vents, I'm painting the middle third with the blood red to make it look like this. That central point there is glowing. With the white, I'm then going to add a couple of little dots on the lenses and a couple of little dots into the vents where I want it to be the most brightest. Then I'm going to put some Green Stuff World fluorescent red on the palette, and I'll apply that over all of it to make it all look like it's glowing red. And then finally a little bit of fluorescent orange from AK, covering just little dots that you painted white, cover with the orange. It's a very straightforward little process really, but you get some fantastic effects with it. So you've got your dark red all the way up to fluorescent orange, and just remember your darkest is your coldest, your lightest is your warmest. So wherever you want the glow to be coming from is where you put your lightest colours. There we go, pretty straightforward. Once that's done, we're just going to highlight a bit of the black. To highlight the black, I just use a bluish grey, which is anthracite, just some of the tubes around his armour, just give them a little edge highlight where they would naturally catch the sunlight, and then I'll make a little mix of about 50-50 anthracite to white, and then just do little little dot highlights of where they would be at their brightest. So this could be on bolt gun casings, weapon casings, around shields, anything you've done black. Just use a dark blue-grey to highlight, and then a little bit of a lighter blue-grey. But try and keep those colours different from the grey of the Space Wolf itself, otherwise it will just blend in a bit too much and won't stand out. Once we've done that, we're going to be moving on to the shield. It's pretty straightforward, this shield. It's only just doing processes we've done. But first of all, we're going to start with the pinks that we did. I painted the parchment seal before recording. So what we're doing here is, for the reddish pink, we base coat everything with AK magenta, which would be Screamer pink in Games Workshop, and then we highlight those pink areas with AK intense pink, which would be sort of a pink horror. So this is the sort of, I forgot what they call it now, but this is just a sort of, anything you wanted to be this sort of colour. This is the sort of laurels that are going around the shield. I just do in pink just to give something, to give it a bit of colour, a bit of difference. I didn't want it all to be gold. So to paint these in pink. The actual parchments are base coated in AK saddle brown and then highlighted with AK light earth, and I do that for any of the leather, the sort of parchments, and the banner there that you can see on his on the shield itself. But yeah, this pink is AK magenta. And there we are, just the intense pink. And with this, just apply some little dots on the wax itself, and then just some little scratches of this across the laurel, just on each of the leaves, just to make them stand out a little bit from the background. Right, and for the bulk of the shield, we're just going back to our tried and trusted method of doing a good gold here, which was burnt tin, rusty gold, old gold. So anything you want to be gold on the shield, just paint as burnt tin as a base coat. Then apply your rusty gold as your first highlight, covering about 80%, just leaving some of that burnt tin in the areas you want to be darkest. And then use the old gold as an edge highlight and bright point highlight, just to where you want it to be the brightest. So I've done that mainly in the central areas, so dark at the edge, brighter at the middle. On the shield you could do different variations. You could have brighter on the left, brighter on the right, dark in the middle, whatever feels right to you, to where the light would be catching it. Imagine the light shining down and how metallics would look. Obviously, you can't say natural when you're using true metallics, because they'll give a shine at any angle, whereas if you were doing non-metallic metal, which we will cover off in another tutorial, you're imagining the light coming from one position and the model to be positioned in that way, whereas this is a tabletop sort of model, so the light's always going to be changing as you move it, but it will give a good gold deep look, the way we paint our golds. Yeah. There we go. Now, the last piece of this puzzle, apart from the basing, is his thunder hammer. Now, the thunder hammer I wanted to be the complete opposite of the base. So the base is going to be snowy, cold. I wanted the thunder hammer to be fiery and hot. So we're going to use our magic mix, which is Vallejo White Ink mixed with contrast, medium and water. So it's 1 part ink, 2 parts medium, 1 part water. Or you can do 1 part ink, 2 parts water, 1 part medium. It's basically a whitewash using white ink. I use the contrast medium just to make it flow a little bit better off the brush. Just using water can get a bit chalky and not flow as well. As you can see here, it's just naturally working like a contrast paint, where it seeps into the recesses first. So this is the basis of where the brightest points are going to be. It looks really haphazard at first, but I'm just doing it where I want the skull to be the creation of the bright points, and sort of some areas around it of where it would be naturally sort of hot if the heat was coming from the centre. And then I imagine that the central point of the hammer itself would be hot. So I'm just adding some white dots of this mix across the central points, and we'll clear that up with the airbrush a little bit later. I did start adding some little scratches and that, but it wasn't working, so I abandoned that idea. But yeah, the premise here is the white point is your brightest point, and for me it's coming from the core of the axe and the core of the actual the core of the thunder hammer, and the core of each of the actual hammers themselves. Okay, so we don't destroy everything with the airbrush, I'm just going to cover some of the model in the Green Stuff World Modelling Putty. You can get modelling putty from lots of places. You could actually use model masking tape. If I hadn't glued the arm off, I'd have taken the arm off itself, but obviously that's not always the case for everybody. We like to have glued together models, but the modelling putty, as you can see, it's easy just to chuck it over the model and then manipulate it just to cover any areas you don't want to be covered in paint. It's a good thing to have. I think it was only about £5 for that entire tub, and it lasts forever. I've had that for about 2 years now, and it's still just as good as new. It's if you're airbrushing, instead of having to use masking tape and paper and that, the putty is pretty decent, especially if you're working on a bigger model with complex shape. So that's all in preparation to move across to the airbrush with the Vallejo White Ink. So with this, just apply the white ink, aim the nozzle directly over the points that you're brightest, so you're naturally creating that halo gradient effect, so that your bright points is pure white and then it fades itself out to black, so that when we apply our fluorescence over the top, you're going to get naturally really bright areas, really dark areas, and then we can enhance those dark areas later with some brush work. So yeah, follow along here, but just remember your central points of the white, then just go over those with the airbrush to create natural gradients out to the dark areas. So we're going to be applying 3 fluorescent colours here. We're going to be going from Fluorescent Yellow by AK. Then we're going to be using AK Fluorescent Orange just to tone down the yellowness, actually to tone the greenness down. Fluorescent Yellow to the eye looks green when you paint it. It's very bizarre. So the orange takes away that greenness and applies some orange heat to it. We're then going to be almost, with the Fluorescent Red by GSW, by Green Stuff World, we'll be applying it via the airbrush and almost just catching the edges of it. So you leave some of the orange but leave a sort of natural gradient back into the orange with the red. And then we'll be moving over to brushwork. You'll see here it's so bright, it's blatting out the camera. So on the next screen, to actually turn the overhead light off so that you see a bit more of actually how the finish looks, because it's a bit hard to see, but you can see there's orange coming through to it, but it's so bright. The camera can't pick it up, but you'll see it in the next shots. But all we're doing here is just going over the yellow with orange, but not too much, just so that it gets rid of that greenness. Any areas you want to be orange, to be looking cooler from the yellow, just add a little bit more into those areas. So here we are with the red, and I'm all the time with the nozzle I'm aiming away from the central areas. It's a really good paint, really adds heat to it. It's quite incredible how this red fluorescent paint works. So I'm tending to aiming so that the paint catches the edges, almost like you're dry brushing with the airbrush. It's very odd to explain what's happening, but I'm always facing the airbrush away from the central point, so that as the paint is sprayed over the model, it's only catching the areas like the edges, the outermost edges, and the rest is going onto the mat or onto my fingers or onto the putty. It's a handy little skill to do. It's just another thing you can do with airbrushes. Like I say, it's almost dry brushing with an airbrush, so that you catch the edges and leave the central points as they were, which means that you leave like the eyes of the skull bright, those deep recesses are left bright, the central points of the hammer, even though they get a little bit of this red, they still remain bright. And that's the airbrush for that done. Once it's done, you can rip the putty off, as I do here. It comes off really easily, no paint comes off. I haven't varnished this model before I put the putty on, so it comes off nice and easily. We're then going to move to some brushwork, and what I've got on the wet palette there on the sort of bottom right edge is AK Black Red and AK Tenebrous Grey. Now the Black Red is our first highlight, I think you would call it, but it's not a highlight. It's to cool our effect down. So what this black red is doing is going to be, as you see with lava, it's the crust. So this is the crust that we're getting around the edges of the hammer. So with the blood red, I apply a thick edge highlight around the hammer itself and any areas that I want to be cool. So yeah, it's applied around all the edges, the top of the skull, around the base of the actual thunder hammer itself. I think I keep saying axe. I don't know why I keep saying axe. So yeah, just edge highlight it, add thicker bits and thinner bits. Just imagine this is the crust, or the beginnings of the crust. Once that's done, I then use a little bit of the Tenebrous Grey to be even darker. So on the areas I want really cold, I just add a few little dots of this, just very minute, subtle differences, but the eye does pick these up. It's surprising how much of an effect this little bit that we do here manages to accomplish. Right, now with the white, I'm going to be adding just some little dots in the centre of the hammers. I wanted to add a little bit more orange glow. A bit of it had been lost. So yeah, just a couple of little dots in the very centre of each of the hammer points, and then I'm going to be painting some AK orange directly over the top. I also add some white to the eyes in the centre of the skull, because we're going to be using another little paint on those to really make the eyes the bright point. So yeah, just a couple of dots around. This bit's a bit optional, but it is worth doing. Just adds a little bit more definition, a bit more heat to that hammer. And then once you've done this, you can just go over those areas in the AK fluorescent orange. Okay, this next section is optional. You could actually just use the AK Fluorescent Yellow, but to really make the yellow shine here, we're using the, let me just grab it for the name, it's the AK Wargames Enamel Liquid Pigment. So get an old brush with a very small tip, give the bottle a good shake, and you just need the smallest amount on your brush, tiny bits on your brush, and then just add the dots into his eyes, into the skulls, where you want your brightest point. And after a few seconds, it doesn't dry, it doesn't look bright when it's wet. Give it a minute or two to dry, and it's really bright. Use that paint very sparingly. Too much and it looks terrible. It sort of over brightens everything. And then all I do here is with some pure AK Fluorescent Yellow, just paint this into your points where you want it to be brightest. The way this paint works, where it's quite pigment heavy but quite thin at the same time, it just flows in nicely and just brings some extra heat back into those central points. I'm going to put some blood red onto the wet palette. We're just going to do a minor little bit of OSL, object source lighting on his hand. So with the black red, I just imagine the hammer is just making a little bit of a shine down onto his arm, onto his hand. I paint some of the black red, and then I apply a little bit of blood red to that, then a little bit of white and a bit of fluorescent red, just to give the arm as if it's just reflecting back some of the glow from the hammer itself. Very subtle, but adds a little bit more flavour to our miniature. And there he is, all done. I apply transfer via the normal means, nothing clever there, and then apply some matte varnish over the top. So for his base, I've just I base coated it in grim brown, and then dry brush some of the metallics and added a couple of tufts of grass. I actually forgot to glue the tufts down, so I actually can't stuck drawing this bit, but I'm just using some of the Valhalla snow stuff from Games Workshop. You can get it from AK Interactive, but I had a couple of spare pots of this, and all I'm doing is, what I actually do here is I did a wash of a bright orange, light rust from AK, but you can use scrag brown or squig orange, those sorts of colours heavily washed down to give you a rust colour effect. Did a wash of that over the base, and then I apply this snow over the top, and in some places the rust colour, the wash, was still wet, and it just absorbed a little bit into the white, so it doesn't, the snow then isn't clean white, it's actually dirty, as if it has been on the battlefield for a while, and the rust and dirt and grime has been seeping into it. Just another little handy weapon to have in your arsenal, of just some. Don't have to wait for all of that stuff to dry. If you want it to look dirty, then just apply a little bit of that over the top. You could equally apply it, wait for it to dry, then add the rust afterwards, but you could then overwash it. So this is how I do that. And then so I apply just the snow, little dots here and there, where it would almost naturally be in the corners. In the corners and that, have a little bit more, so it looks like it's piling up. A couple of dots over your tufts, just to make it look like the snow has fallen. I always find not too much snow on the base helps sell the snow a little bit more. And if it was on a battlefield, it would be all wet, filth, and trodden. And that's about it. I use the then just paint the base in black, and there he is, all finished. Pretty quick, get a nice finish across the model. So if you've liked this video, just like and subscribe, follow along for a lot more tutorials. This is the sort of fourth in the Learn to Paint series, so I hope you've enjoyed it, and happy painting.